Welcome back to the podcast. I believe this is episode 45? 45.
One of
I
those.
know.
That's too many.
Yeah, we're in the 40s. Yeah, we're feeling it.
We're halfway through.
I'm happy to see everybody again today. Michael is dressed particularly well. Bray, as well as he always is. It's good to see you. Very good. and chilling as always. And I have a new topic question today is, quote, so we travel the stars. What next? So you can see it in the. So your immediate thought is, at least for me, is you have this idea, this concept of what the future holds for mankind, for humanity, and it seems to be this thing that's sort of something similar to Interstellar or any of those sci-fi dreams that we seem to have, and we go off and we see things, and we see travel the stars and go off and go off and go off. But is that the full destiny of mankind? Is that just the way that is that the way the story ingratiates itself? I mean, what exactly does that turn into? What exactly becomes of us in that sense? Like, what comes after that? So that's the topic question in mind. With that, I'd like to get started with Michael and see how you're doing. Are you having a good morning out there?
I'm groggy.
He's groggy.
But it's nice. It's nice here. Another day in paradise. So I was thinking about this, and then immediately I am reminded of a document that came out a couple of years back called All Tomorrows. I didn't personally read through it. My brother seemed to be quite interested in it. He's more sci-fi than I am. This is also not my topic area because I'm such a pragmatist that, like, thinking about far-flung future stuff like this mostly just gets me thinking about people colonizing Mars and then, like, segregating themselves off from the rest of humanity and some sort of colony or whatever.
I think that's Stranger in a Strange Land, I think.
Yeah?
That's the whole plot of that book.
Awesome.
Yeah, I see where your thinking is. See, the problem with thinking about this sort of topic in mind, like, so we travel the stars, what next? That's so far flung and out there, so distant from what we can have right now, what I can touch right now. I can touch on the idea that we're going to build a orbiting station around the moon. Like, that's an idea that NASA has. I can crystallize in my mind the beginning steps of sending humans to Mars, and then eventually, hopefully begin mass transit of material and humans over to Mars, beginning that colonization process. I can see these things, but beyond those things, there seems to be so much noise, so much, so many unknowns, so many variables that I can't even begin to collate together to be able to build some sort of idea of the future, that it almost feels as if I'm wasting my time. Like, it's just not something that I'm able to touch upon, or it's like a mind game that I just reach an I don't know very, very, very quickly. With that thought in mind, Bray, I wonder how you feel about this particular topic. Also, good morning.
Good morning to both of you and to anybody who's listening out there. Also, thinking about this sort of question. I used to think about this a lot whenever I was younger, and especially as I got older, because I started to seep into that area of wondering, like, about meaning overall. And so that gave myself the angle of, well, what is everybody working towards, like, as a collective? Like, everybody has their own individual goals, but, like, I mean, like, what is driving the actual, like, material physical forces in the world towards something, because it's not like everybody on the planet agrees on their paths or goals or desires and things like that, but somehow we're all just here coexisting, and it works more or less. Very big more or less.
Super organism.
So yeah, about what we do after we travel the stars, I liked this question because it suggests a lot about the past and the particular scenario that we are capable of traveling the stars. So there has to be some degree of success in an outlet, whether that's all these people's, humanity's needs are met to such a degree, and there's such little conflict that we're capable of just traveling the stars, or maybe we somehow stay separated by nation states, long enough to where we're traveling the stars on, China Airlines, or China Space Lines, or U.S. Space Lines, or things like that, and there's still tensions between the Chinese colonists on planet XY 247 and the neighboring planet of whatever. You get what I'm saying. Um, but yeah, what's next? I don't know. I hope that I don't know, finding aliens.
That'd be cool.
I
Michael,
would.
what are you building? Listeners that aren't watching the video, he's building some sort of
It's not
apparatus.
relevant to the conversation.
It's not relevant to
Some
the
sort of
It's becoming
apparatus.
relevant.
It's this little
That's what we do after we travel the stars.
we build
We start
apparatus.
building
Yeah, that's right.
things.
Yeah, we start building.
There's a sound clip going off in my head where some guy is just saying apparatus and it's got an echo on it, and I can't remember what it's from, or I'd hand it to you. Maybe we'll add that in post if we can.
Well, something that I began to think about after this topic was suggested was the contributing factors to why humans went to the moon. Because there's or why we continue space exploration at all, in the sense of
Oh, that's a great question.
like sending probes or planning to do things. Like, obviously there's always going to be those people who are like, we can mine the asteroids and be richer than God, but then there's just people who are like, yeah, I want to take pictures of like something nobody else will ever be able to see in their lifetime because it's so far away.
I can't. There are myriad reasons. There's never going to be one reason, but one reason that I really like, something that I find meaningful, is this one physicist. Although I forget his name, he's a Western physicist, and he had this point about space exploration that I thought was really, to me, meaningful. He said, well, as far as we are currently aware, as far as we know, this planet, this place, is the only place where meaning exists, where there's meaning in the universe, as far as that we are aware. So it seems not inherently, but immediately compelling to one that hears this, that to do what one can to disperse meaning, to make sure that meaning doesn't end, like a candlelight being blown out in the wind.
Man, that's some colonialist bullshit right there. Do you hear yourself? Do you hear yourself? Come on.
It's like bioevolutionary colonialism.
We have to take meaning to the stars. They deserve it.
They deserve. Well, first off, there's like they're
meaningless right now. We can give them
Your
meaning.
petty single cellular organistic life means nothing until you.
Look,
I mean, I know
that quasar did nothing to you. Leave it alone.
Listen, I know we're kidding, but like that irks me so much, because I do meet with people that speak like in those terms, and which is somewhat frightening, because if you find Mars and you find that it does in fact have no life on it, I mean, that's not something you could ever be 100% certain of. That's just how it works. But
Sure.
when you can be almost certain that there is no life on Mars, the idea that to colonize Mars is anything but positive, or to believe that it's a negative thing to colonize Mars when it's an empty planet, to me makes no sense. It just makes no sense. Like there's nothing fatally wrong with doing so. I can see no qualms whatsoever with terraforming Mars or Venus or any of the moons of Jupiter. It does. There seems to be a sort of anti-life or an anti-us sort of quality to
death drive.
Yeah, death drive, like Freud. But there seems to be that drive sometimes whenever you start this conversation. Oh, it's a little light lantern thing.
Yes.
Isn't that cute? Gotta hang that up somewhere. Yeah. So you see this issue generally, or you do somewhat see this issue amongst people when you have this conversation, like a somewhat negative quality to traveling Mars or traveling the moon, and I find that incredibly upsetting. I do. But moving on into the topic, though, I wanted to press a little bit further and say, just to sort of expound a little bit of what we do know or what we think it will be like a little bit, talking about interstellar travel. Um, you know, where to get started?
What do you got?
What kind of interstellar travel? How far along in the process?
Right.
I'm thinking like let's talk very, very, very minimum. Just trying to get humans from Earth, from the Sol system to the system adjacent to the Sol system. Just the closest place that has stellar bodies that can be terraformed. That
Okay.
sort of thing.
Alright.
That sort of thing.
Relativistic or non-relativistic?
Explain.
So you got different types of travel over time, right? So you have your relativistic travel, which you're going so far past, and I believe it's beyond, if not very close to the speed of light, where the relativistic speeds basically cause a time dilation, and you yourself age slower than the standard perspective, we'll say. This comes up as a key point in the transition between Ender's Game and it's not Children of the Mind. Speaker for the Dead. I think it's the next book. I'm not counting. I'm not counting the fifth one. Orson wrote
I've
years
only read
later.
the first one.
However, it gets whacked. But at the beginning of the second book, you find out that like Ender is 30 years old physically, but he's been traveling around space for the last 3,000 years. So due to relativistic time travel, like effectively, he's only physically aged and experienced 30 years. So that's a much more advanced technology, theoretical in almost the soft sci-fi sense to me, but
So
yeah. Oh my God.
yeah, Bray, please speak on this. I'm curious if you want to tie this to
No,
Interstellar. I feel like you will.
there's so much baggage that comes with talking about interstellar travel and communication and things like that. That it really boggles my mind. And I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast before, but I used to have this idea for like I've probably mentioned this before. Like a sci-fi plot. Matter of fact, this probably exists, but where we send out a small group of like astronauts or whatever they would be called if you're sending them like long. I don't know if that's still
Cosmonaut.
astronauts. Yeah.
I actually don't know.
Anyways, we send out this team like to a planet that we know is habitable, and the trip's going to take like a really long time. They're going to have to go into like the sci-fi equivalent
like
of
Mars is 40 years, right? So,
hibernation or something. Well,
So-
Mars is a little bit more achievable. Like we're talking about 40 years. Like I'm talking about like a really long time.
like 100 years.
Yeah, something like more extensive. I mean, when I explain this, it really won't matter. But we send these people out. It's going to take X number of years for them to arrive there. Well, shortly after they depart, faster than light travel, or basically what Michael's talking about, is discovered, and so that's constructed, and then we send out,
Right, so they get there and there's already a civilization waiting for
by the
them
time they
when
get
they
there,
arrive.
exactly.
Yeah, there's an it's been fully colonized.
Yes.
Cool. That's a fun thought.
And I think about stuff like that, like how would say, Trevor, like your prompt, like what do we do after we travel the stars? Imagine that there is some comprehensive like intergalactic network of places. You could even consider them all to be inhabited by humans. Like we have super colonized. We are like the England of the stars, and we've got our fingers in everywhere. But all of these places have operate on different time scales because of relativity. And so
I don't think the word network would be useful in that sort of context because the distance and the length it takes for information to travel from place to place would be so long. It would be so difficult for one stellar group to communicate with another stellar group unless there was something going on. Like, I wouldn't even be sure if you could form one. Well, not even sure. I'm fairly certain you wouldn't be able to form one government underneath those two things, or one
Well, that's what I.
ongoing body or form of communication.
This
Mhm.
is a whole problem that they cover. But as far as communication, the sci-fi answer, and I believe this is definitely Scott Card, but also like um, I want to say Le Guin coined it, but I'm really not sure. Um, you ever heard of an Ansible?
No.
Okay, it's this idea that you have a communication piece that bypasses that limitation.
We use gravity.
Well, here,
We take Matthew McConaughey and we keep him in like a hyperbaric chamber, and we keep making him do the fucking
book
gravity
thing.
shit with the Morse code for literally every piece of information that we need sent
Well,
throughout time and space.
so I think one of the actual like potential answers would be tracking things that are quantum linked.
I've seen that. I have seen that, and I've always thought to myself, well, first let me take a huge step back,
Yeah.
and talk about what we can do and what we can't do. Like when we talk about like traveling from stellar fields or from one star to another star to colonize and be interstellar. So I can't. If I personally cannot speak as to how humanity would be able to reach the speed of light. That's not something that we're capable of doing right now. So if I just work with what I know that we're capable of, or can relatively look out and see and be capable of right now, I can kind of build in my mind how it would be possible to travel to another star system. I don't know if it would be accurate, but I also don't know if it would be inaccurate. I also know that if I don't know if it'll be accurate in the long term, but I do know that it is something that could happen. It's within the field of happenings. You know,
Mhm.
I can't know whether or not it's possible to travel at or just close to the speed of light for a human ship, and I don't know what exactly that time scale would look like. So let me talk about a little bit about what I can know can happen, and that can let me cast a net of some level of plausibility. So with that in mind, I'd like to talk a little bit about a different book, a different science fiction book called "Songs of Distant Earth" by Arthur C. Clarke. And he kind of encounters this issue in, I think, a brilliant way. And then I'll get to this whole thing about entangled uh, states, entangled particles soon enough. Um, so,
Entangled states, you say?
hmm, well, let's talk about this.
Sounds
So,
spicy.
well, Songs of Distant Earth. So, what Arthur C. Clarke does in this book is he recognizes that basically the ability to colonize another planet, like send humans out that far. Like we don't know how to put somebody into stasis, let's say. Like Bria, I don't know how to freeze you and then bring you back to life. I don't know
Yeah,
how to do
it's
that.
the unfreezing that we don't have figured
Yeah,
out.
yeah, well, I can freeze you just fine, but yeah, the whole idea of making you not dead afterwards, not so
Yeah.
sure. So one of the solutions to this problem, and this isn't exactly what happens in Songs of Distant Earth, but it's a useful way of looking at it, is he builds these essentially satellite ships or dead ships that are capable of interstellar travel. They travel, moderately fast compared to how we can travel now. They're not doing the speed of light. And what's fun about them is that they do not contain humans in them. That's not their purpose. Their purpose is to colonize other planets, but they don't contain full, ready to go humans. What they contain is small amounts of organic matter and that sort of thing. Or in the case of this actual book, what they do is they carry
Ooh.
like singular human cells, so like embryos, that sort of thing, and just contains them off to the side in a little frozen chamber where they sit comfortably for thousands of years.
I hate to
Uh,
tell you,
Please.
you're just making these this just sounds like a virus sitting on a thing, waiting to be activated by a biologic walking by.
Yeah,
Like,
this is like the
Oh
plot
yeah,
of
like a
every alien movie ever.
well. Listen, you can add that negative connotation if you like, but so let's get into this.
it's a
So
matter of perspective, you
it
could
is well,
say.
everything is.
Yeah.
Uh, the fact that you can have perspectives, though, that's the positive of the organoid sitting inside that little cell on its way to and on the satellite ship. So anyway, the
Uh,
satellite ship will then go, however fast or slow it can, to this adjacent solar system, and it finds whatever planet it was heading towards. And essentially, what it does is it then colonizes that planet and then creates humans out of this inert matter, or not inert matter, but out of these human cells. It just sort of creates them. It creates like a nursery that can kind of create them, and
Like a
kind of
3D printer or like a gestational or
well, that's a good question. In terms of the book, it quite literally was just human embryos that were then put into a state where they can grow into full humans. Like this isn't something that we can do right now in that case. But it's so much more possible than uh, faster than light travel. Let's say. Were you mass producing the light? What are you? What are you doing? What are you making? He's making a third one. What the-
Hey.
keep going.
All right. But yeah, so they go out and they begin this process with these embryos, and they create gestation chambers that can then create more humans. And they have this nursery, and then from the nursery they then do like teaching, and essentially an artificial intelligence will raise these children into adults. And then there you are, you have humans on the other side of this extremely long trip. You didn't have to worry about energy expenditures or anything like that. You just have humans over there. Now, this solves a couple problems. First and foremost, do you have a colony ship, like in the traditional sense, of a bunch of humans living their day-to-day lives on the colony ship waiting to get to their goal planet? Like if you're traveling in barren space for ceaseless amounts of time, and there's no solar rays or very little, there's no basically as you do that, you begin like losing little bits of energy at a time as the colony ship moves. And you just you use up more energy than you create naturally. You're not getting anything from the outer world, and eventually you're going to be quite finite. And that's the colony ship trying to make itself to its destination. And also, it's just a very flawed way of doing things. It's very dangerous, sending a bunch of colonists on a ship out. You don't know what the fuck's going to happen to it. So it kind of solves that problem a little bit. So there you are, satellite ships.
Until
Now,
eventually one of them doesn't make it to its destination, and it's just drifting in space, sending out a distress signal over and over and over again.
talk about the satellite ship or the.
Yeah. I think he's onto something.
Right.
But that aside, I want to talk about So what exactly is that satellite ship doing? Well, it seems like essentially, in so many words, it's just sending information. It's sending information from here to there, and then that information is transcribed into humans, which can then go off in big success. We now have humans on the other side of the grand void. But it's essentially sending information. So if you think of it like that, I've seen some talk about entangled particles and that sort of thing. Like this thing buzzes in this way and that thing buzzes in the same way anywhere in the universe or anywhere. And I became intrigued by the possibility of using it to transfer information. But long story short, you can't do that.
No?
From what I've found online, I need to talk to my physicist friend and ask him more about it. But essentially, when one particle buzzes in this way, the other particle buzzes in the same way. But you can't actually input information into it. I can't make it binary on, and then get the same information over there. Like, from what I understand, that's not something we're capable of doing. So no. But if we could, theoretically, if we could, that could be essentially a solution to the problem. All you have to do is be able to, it could be a solution to a lot of problems. One of which is the ability to transfer information and create that network across planets. But you could also use it for things like a sort of silly teleportation. Like if I get all the information that makes up my body, including the way that my neurons are aligned right now, down to like where the ATP is being stored and about to be fired, and you just copy all of that information, then replicate it in 7 galaxies over there, you could have an interstellar civilization that way. But at the moment, it seems that we don't have that. It's so much more little blips of light.
Is that almost the Star Trek method with the? Well, not quite, I guess.
Their teleportation thing is I
It's
suppose
ship
it's similar.
Theseus, right?
Yeah.
Or we'll do this. We'll say we have a wormhole, right? We've got a wormhole exit and a wormhole entrance or something. Oh, well, shit, that's not going to work because those are only one way. There's no bi-directional.
Hey, question.
Shoot.
What the donk is a wormhole? I've
It's a
heard
good
that
question.
word for so long that it kind of stopped meaning anything. I used to think it was a black hole, and now I'm confused.
No, the wormhole is is like an intentionally placed disruption of space time with like the
I don't know if
No,
that's a
like
disruption of space time as much it's just like a way that
a
space time is
wrinkle in
behaving.
time.
well,
It's a
I
tangle
guess you could
there.
say it's a disruption from our perspective.
All right, very good.
I guess. No, I was gonna say it'd be neat
It's my perspective.
if you could have some sort of like device that you shot back and forth in and out of a bidirectional wormhole that
I'm shooting a device in and out
transmitted
of a
information.
hole. Okay,
Hmm.
in and out of a hole.
Yes.
Kind of like a, and every time it comes back across the other side, it broadcasts, and then it like flies back. Basically, like a teleporter with extra steps.
Sure. They there's actually a silly video game I know about that's kind of similar to that. It's called Grey Goo. And
Grey goo.
essentially, yeah, Grey Goo. And essentially, humanity begins in earnest trying to colonize space, like an interstellar sense. And they can open up wormholes that are extremely small, extremely small, and send out very, very basic material through them. And essentially, what they can send through isn't like ships or anything of that sort, but they can send in small cells. They can send in cells through these wormholes, and they can send them into
Cells.
other planets. So what they send are these small nano machines, small nano machines that are good at replicating themselves and then
Nanomachines,
becoming and then
son.
growing out and then forming things that can then survey other planets and send that information back through the wormhole back to Earth.
That's pretty cool.
So that's what they do. But the issue is the gray goo essentially develops a cancer, becomes cancerous, and then mutates again, then mutates a third time. And now
And it's coming back to Earth.
actually all it wants to do is destroy the planet that it's on. But there are like
Oh.
alien inhabitants of that planet, so that's kind of a messed up thing. So humans are the assholes in that game.
All will be assimilated.
Pretty much. Yeah. But so wormhole could be a solution to the network problem, but it looks like at least from the way that things are possible right now, it seems like there are just dark lights. Like this one civilization or this one group of this one system here, this one system over there, and this one system over there. If it takes you literally decades to communicate with one another, it doesn't seem like there's any other option. With that in mind, Michael, what are you building?
Series of lamps.
Michael is like our Gen Alpha
I'm gonna
content.
communicate.
You know how we're doing like the podcast? There'll be those videos of like something on your feed and then
Listen.
they're like somebody playing Subway Surfers. Like Michael is
Yeah, at the
providing the
bottom.
Subway Surfers content.
That's right. That's right.
I have the Gen Alpha power of being able to participate in the conversation and do this.
Nice.
Exactly.
They keep getting bigger. It's a bigger one.
This is the biggest one, so I just needed the 3. These are gonna go on my porch. It's gonna be beautiful.
Nice.
Very
What is
good.
it made of? Just like little.
Well, this one's made of metal.
Oh, okay.
All right.
This one is a plastic piece.
Very cool. You're gonna use like artificial lights? You're gonna put like
They each come with like a little LED kit thing,
Ooh.
and you can turn them on with this button, and they'll figure out what time it is, and then they'll turn on for 6 hours, turn off, and then turn on the next 24-hour loop. So I just set it and forget it.
Nice.
Have a little
So-
porch light.
Porch ambiance.
Very good.
Well, I, for one, this is the thing about space travel.
And that's how you'll know I'm alive with space travel. You get a really good microscope, and you'll know when it's night on Earth, because this will be on.
Yeah, there you go. I am upset that I will not live for the day, if it ever comes in our universe, that there's mass commercial recreational space travel, like what's the word I'm looking for? Cars, like the equivalent of car infrastructure in space. like that I don't have my Millennium Falcon parked out back that I can just get on and fly up, and that there's actually shit for me to see
Right.
up there.
Go over to
Then
Venus and then swing around Mercury or
exactly,
something. Yeah.
I've got to settle for my van. That's my Millennium Falcon.
Sure.
How big of a gap in time do you think
Until we're able to do
between
something like that.
the first personal spacecraft
Well,
owned,
and keep in mind
owned
we're talking.
by Bezos and I don't know, Firefly?
I feel like they could do that now. Honestly, like I don't know what's preventing you from.
A lot of money.
A lot of
It's a
money.
lot of money.
I do thoroughly think that it has a lot to do with the fact that there's nothing to do up there. Well, no. First off, it's technology.
Here's
What
a
am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that I think that those sort of things will arrive. Personal aircraft or personal spacecraft will arrive when we actually have an industry that has some use of them. That is to say, that at the moment we are on one planet.
Mhm.
As soon as we are on two planets, that'll become much more viable. Just imagine like landing stations and that sort of thing. But it'll become much, much, much more viable when we're also on Venus and at least two of the moons of Jupiter, and so on and so forth, where there's sort of a multi entryway system for people to travel around to. But at the same time, it's kind of difficult because it seems to me that the most go-to thing uh, when I think of this, when I try to abstract this, it's simply shuttling systems from planet to planet, going from Earth to the moon, and there's another one that goes from the moon to Mars. It's more similar in context to the way that we do planes right now, as we do domestic travel on our flights. It would be more similar to that. I mean, it's a bit like people in the 1800s speaking about, well, how everyone's going to have their airplane that they're going to use to go to work in Paris,
Mhm.
and they'll fly back and spend the night in Birmingham. But that ended up not being true for myriad reasons. Uh,
This is
Perhaps
expensive.
because it's expensive. Yes, I mean, for all we know,
Do
that
you
could
think
actually.
so what I want to get at is, do you think a spaceship is going to be cheaper or more expensive than owning an airplane?
Hmm. What, like when they are both available?
Mm-hmm.
I would assume so.
More expensive?
I mean, I would
Well,
assume.
I guess it
Yeah.
depends
I
on
mean,
what you want
the
to.
degree of risk of death is higher.
Yeah.
Like there's so much more work you have to do to actually make it viable, to actually
Yeah,
make it not
absolutely.
kill you instantly.
So I guess one of the things that I want to point out here is, if you start thinking about this even a little bit, owning a spaceship in a sci-fi is the equivalent of saying I'm some guy's rich kid. Like, there's no way you own a spaceship in a sci-fi without having some absurd amount of money that you use to buy that spaceship.
Mm.
The ubiquity of a spaceship, like, I mean, think about that. And then, like, does that mean like most sci-fi falls into the trap of like early novelizations where it's all about like aristocrats functionally?
Well, no, I don't think so. Only because, well, for the fact that all of us now have cars, I don't see too
That's
much
a
of a
different
difference.
thing. That's a different thing.
I don't think it is. But
Well,
here,
you just said planes though.
well,
So planes and cars happen side by side almost. I mean, there's a
sure.
disjoint for sure of like a while, but planes are.
Hmm.
Mm, how do I put this? I'm very curious. I'm very curious. I don't think spaceships would ever be as affordable as a car.
No, no, I definitely don't think they'll be as. What I mean to say is the relative position between you and your ability to acquire a car will be the same as somebody in X years' ability to acquire a spaceship. That's what I'm saying. There will essentially what I'm making an argument for is that in the X amount of time that humanity will exist for the rest of the future, like extend how far you want, 2400, 2800, 44,000, whatever you want to say. It seems to me that has become more efficient with our systems and also increase in technology and also have a huge need for it with, mining asteroids, traveling commercially, doing this, that, and the other thing. there will arise a relativistic, uh, cheap or relativistic ability
Relativity.
for you to acquire a spaceship. Now, it'll start something like spaceships that can't enter planets. It'll be something like you can go from space station to space station, if I had to guess.
And then you
Something
take the
that'll let
space
you.
elevator down.
Yeah, yeah. Like you'd park it in the space station. Like for example, let's say you have like a space. You have something similar or akin to the Millennium Falcon or something. What it'll probably be able to do is it would take you to the space station that orbits the moon, to which you then take a lander to the moon to do your moon business, and then you go back up to the space station. Because leaving solar bodies or celestial bodies would be insanely difficult. You know, like just like how much energy we have to expend right now to leave Earth. I mean, just imagine having to have a spaceship capable of doing that.
That's what
But
I
I'm
was
not
going to
making
say
the argument.
earlier.
Yeah, but I'm not making the argument that even that would be not relativistically cheap at one point. Who knows? My argument is essentially it'll necessarily be so as we increase in efficiency and stability and just essentially increase in ability. That relativistic position between you and acquiring like a spaceship, even capable of taking off from a planet, will become more easy. Relativistically similar to or akin to you possessing a car right now. I mean, I have to make down payments on my car. I have to pay X amount each month, and I
Mm-hmm.
have to make sure I generate enough income to be able to afford my car. I also have to pay for a bunch of other things, such as like I have to pay for my registration or that sort of thing. Like it's an expensive thing, but it's not an impossible thing. It's something that fits within the purview of me as a middle class American. It's all relative in that sense. It seems to me.
Mm-hmm.
But all of this is within, I think, the purview of traveling around or taking a step back. I can only assume that these spaceships that can go from planet to planet. I'm speaking really in terms of only within one stellar body, only orbiting Sol or our sun. Like it doesn't seem like the ability to go from that. Like it seems multi-level here to be able to go from a ship that's capable of traveling from the moon's orbit to the Earth's orbit to Venus's orbit is the first step, and after that, a step would be being able to enter and leave celestial bodies, so be able to like exit Earth and re-enter Earth if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But those two things are here, and it's a quantum leap to be able to have a ship that can feasibly get to another star system where there are other planets or other cities or other civilizations and other space stations. Like the ability to go from here to there is something that it far extends beyond my imagination. Is something that a ship is capable of doing. I mean, just imagine, for example, let's say you could travel almost the speed of light.
Mm-hmm.
You could almost travel the speed of light. Well, here's the thing: you get to that speed, however long it takes, and then you have to spend about half of the trip, half of the distance, just decelerating, so you don't pass by whatever it is you're trying to get to, and then you finally get there. And then, like the act of transiting from one system to another like that, even if you could travel that fast. I mean, like we talk about this a little bit at the beginning with Interstellar, but you would be saying goodbye to everything you know about the Sol system as you enter our the adjacent system, whatever is there. You'd be saying goodbye to all of it, everyone that you knew.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you hit that button, they all just age to death. It's gone. I mean, that's one of the things that I'm thinking about here when I talk about the worry, the concern with having a multi-stellar civilization. It doesn't seem possible. It
Mm-hmm.
seems more like we do it. Like it does seem like we can functionally do it. I do believe that humans can go off to those things, whether in a literal sense, like humans, or in a very small sense, like just human cells, or even inert matter being wired into human cells, or whatever it takes. I think that might be possible, but the idea of having a communication line or an ability to create a civilization that extends beyond just one star system or one small cluster of star systems, like 4 or 5 clustered together, seems incredibly difficult and not something that's easily surpassed or done. But what do I know? I'm only in the 21st century. That's quite early as far as things go. It's hard to say. It really is. With all this in mind, there's one thing that we haven't talked about, and that is what next? The whole point of the topic question in mind. Because we talk about now, like there's this general geist that we need to travel the stars. We need to go to Mars, to the
How
moon.
far
We need to
ahead do
go to
you want to
Mars.
go?
Well, I just mean, is that it? Like in the theme of Star
Okay.
Trek. He says it's the final frontier, and that's like the final thing that humanity does is travel
Okay.
the stars. So is that the grand scape of things? Is that the the remaining part of human consciousness? Is just to travel the stars? Because I don't think it seems quite endless. It seems like something humans will just do for the rest of time. We'll extend here and then there and then there and there and there. We'll find hardships along the way. That's part of the reason why we do it. And that seems to be the end. It seems to be the full extent of human consciousness. Like, for example, like right now, we have like many different changing perspectives over time here on Earth as we kind of encounter who we are and become who we are and change and change and change. Like, at one point, the perspective generally was pleasing the gods, do what is pleasing to the gods. And then we have this changing perspective of there being like earth spirits or family spirits around us, depending on where you are, suddenly believing that there is only one Godhead, and this one Godhead sent down one begotten Son. And then that's a completely revitalizes the human perspective, and then it's about serving God, and what can I do that is good to God and what is good to Christ, that sort of thing, in this part of the planet. And then other parts of the planet, you have this idea of nirvana or nothingness or the Buddha changing here. So why am I saying all this? I mean to say that there are many different myriad changing perspectives here on Earth as the hundreds of years go by. Well, this final frontier thing seems to be something that we're entering into. Will it become this grand uh, structure of human consciousness from that point forward, or one superordinate position from which we'll look at many things? It seems to be this one thing above everything. It doesn't seem like it. I mean, where does it go at that point? Do we travel the stars until we don't want to anymore, and then we become nothing? Do we travel the stars, and then that's the end of it? Do we?
Yes.
What what befalls life
Are you asking
generally?
what? So this is an interesting thing. The human minds need to know what the terminal end is. It's almost like a form of neuroses.
I
Since
see where you're going. Yeah, I do.
it's multi-common. Ultimately, you run into the heat death of the universe, but that's just not fun to talk about.
No.
The distribution of all energy in a more or less metastable, depleted state where nothing has. Even did you know that even neutrons, protons, electrons, they eventually decay.
Mm.
Eventually, those will too cease. Like, when we talk about the heat death of the universe, I don't know if you think about like a cold gray, kind of infinite expanse with like rocks floating in it, but it's not even that. It's just nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing inside of a giant space that there's nothing to observe nor even interact within. That's the end. You want to talk about anything in between? That's more entertaining to me.
Right.
But that's the end.
Mm.
I think about it. So, talking about the stuff in between now and the eventual heat death of the universe, for human beings, which will end one day. I think part of the question for me is there anything beyond meaning? Like, if a human being can get their basic needs met, which we seem to still have trouble assuring people of on this planet in the 21st century, once they find meaning for themselves, is there anything beyond that? And this kind of goes back to my question of, what were the contributing factors to wanting to go to the moon or wanting to explore space at all? It's like, what value does taking pictures of outer space bring us? It's like, well, it could, enlighten us more about the state of our existence and the reality in which we exist. In some cases, it may provide us material resources, which at the end of the day are here to support our survival. It all comes back to those things. But I think, sort of colloquially, the meaning behind space exploration is just that. It's because we can, because we want to. It's just sort of a burning. There's some fucking like JFK quote out there or something like about exploring space and sort of the passion and power of mankind to do such a thing. That's
Mhm.
kind of what I'm trying to point towards. Is there something beyond that? Like, what? Assume for a moment that everybody on the planet, or at least some incredibly high number of people, were able to not worry about survival anymore, and they could just solely focus on creating meaning in their own life.
Mhm.
Is there anything beyond that? That's what
No.
it sounds like to me, because it's like if you are at the stage in this hierarchy of needs where you have attained meaning and you are constantly working towards that, then what value does exploring the stars provide to you? Is there meaning out there for you? Great. Go find it. If not, maybe it's around you in your more immediate surroundings. But what else is there except waiting to die?
All right, that's a fun way to end. uh, hmm. Well, so one thought I had in relationship to this was a sort of solution to the Fermi paradox again. We do this almost every episode.
Where's my
Um,
where's my shot glass?
yeah, yeah. There you go. You gotta tally that. But so our want to travel the stars, to me, like my first instinct is it's something that's very deeply built into us, in the same sense that the same reason why humanity ended up on the very started at the Horn of Africa and ended up all the way to the southern tip of South America. You know, like the same thing that led to that seems to me the same. Generally speaking, could be seen as the same geist that leads to humanity wanting to spread to the moon and to Mars and to other places. It seems to be quite innate, and not only in humanity but also in other things which are alive. It seems quite credible to say that it is something that humans just do. But another thought of mine is it might be perhaps something to do with the nature of our current state of consciousness. This want to travel the stars, and then once you do it, once you get the process underway, and you send out those ships off to those adjoining planets, there's no cart. There could perhaps be no eternal cart pushing the horse, you know, or a horse pushing the cart. I mean to say, this we have this system right now. This one to travel the stars. That's the horse pushing us towards traveling around the stars. But it could very well be that in an amount of time, who knows when, that horse will no longer be there, and we'll have traveled, and then that's the end of it, or that is the full, or humanity becomes less interested in such things, and that could itself be a solution to the Fermi paradox. That's one state at which I think of this, but at the same time, I come back to that initial thought where it seems that no matter what you do, if you have enough humans, a certain amount of them will want to go travel out further. Like I know people today where I'll speak to them and they'll have no interest in space whatsoever, and they don't care, and they don't like that the government spends money on it. I know people like this, but I
They're
also know
right.
people that are devastated when they talk about how we haven't been to the moon in so many decades. Like it seems to me like there's a certain amount of noise from a population of humans where a certain amount of them will always want to travel out. There's nothing that can be done about it. Every single generation, there's going to be a certain number of them that want to explore and want to go around and see things and go out there. And with that, it seems to be quite like rest assured, humanity will always be expanding and growing and growing and growing. So,
Why is that important?
why is it important?
Why is that important?
Well,
It's important to some people. Why is it important?
it's a bit like this. Um, Man, I wish Stefan was here. He's sick this episode. But there's an episode of Deep Space Nine, Star Trek, where the captain of the space station where the show takes place on is looking up at this stellar phenomenon where it's like these five stars going out, and they call it. And this woman approaches him and says that these are called the running children, or the running siblings. And the captain goes, "What are they running from?" And then the woman goes, "Well, sometimes it's fun just to run." So that would be my answer
Mm.
there. Like I have a certain want to explore. I do, and it comes to me as a child. I wanted to explore my neighborhood, and I did, and I found other kids to play with. And sometimes they pissed me off, and I hung out with other kids. I have a certain sense or want to see things and see my adjoining area in the same sense that a cat likes to explore its area and its territory. I don't know. It's something that's more or less built into me, and I don't mean to say that this is what humanity is like. I mean to say this is what some of humanity is like, and due to the fact that some of humanity is like this, necessarily means that rest assured humanity will be traveling the stars. I can't tell you why I want to do it, but I can't tell you many things. I can only tell you that I enjoy it, and it is something I like to do, and I like to explore, and I like to try out new things. It's something that I enjoy.
I think you
It's
could
it
look at.
wells up. Yes.
I think you could look at space exploration almost as like an act of rebellion by human beings, and in the sense of you can take a particular perspective that I don't think is unpopular. Human beings were never meant to leave the atmosphere. Like, human beings did not evolve in any capacity to be off of the ground in any, for an extended period of time. I mean, if you are off of the ground long enough, you are probably falling and plummeting to your doom. My point is, if we were all still roaming the savannah or the forests and stuff, in this sort of primitive sense, there's no reason for us to go to outer space. But just as there's no reason, more or less, in a survival sense, for Shakespeare to have written any of the number of works that he did, or for Monet to have painted all of the things that he painted, or architects and engineers who have created these world wonders. There's no reason for them to have done that. Just like there really wasn't any, in my opinion, reason for us to have gone to the moon, uh, other than fuck it, we can do it, and we're gonna do it. And it's that sort of thing that reminds me of both something I think was mentioned last episode by me about creativity being a incredible weapon against absurdity, but also part of that is doing things that bring you like self fulfillment, gratification, satisfaction, um, in spite of any lack of existing. Like, you get what I'm saying? It's the meaning making. It's doing something even though there isn't any there.
Sure.
I might wake up every day. It's kind of like exactly what we were talking about last episode, and sort of rituals. What's the value of a ritual that you no longer believe in? It's like, what's the value in going to the moon um, if there's no value to extract from that inherent to our survival? It's not like there's water sitting on the moon that we can ship back to Earth. It's not like there's food sitting up there, or a million trillion bajillion dollars waiting in a safe on the moon. Even if we were to extract some real physical, you name it, kind of value out of the moon that orbits our planet, it would take an immense amount of resources to do so, whether you wanted to, or say, terraform Mars, or do something like that. I mean, that's an immense commitment, and the return on investment is, I mean, that's probably really far down the road if you want to make your money back. But we do it anyway because I think it provides meaning and satisfaction and that sort of stuff that I'm talking about.
So I agree with your assertions, I think, but I do want to touch on them a little bit and change that a little bit. So I don't necessarily think it's a rebellion. So when we say rebellion, I feel like that's we're thinking in terms of modes of thought, like ways of approaching reality, ways that we our perspectives and the ways that we encounter what we see. And I think it's very easy, very useful to look at reality in terms of evolution and what humanity is meant to do in terms of their evolved patterns, and our sweat glands and our ability to run a long length of time, that sort of thing, or where we came from. I think that could be very useful to understanding what humanity got here with and the tools that it has, that sort of thing. but I think it's I suppose you could say an epistemic error to say that that is the position from which all things can be touched. You know, like, oh my goodness. But uh, I think necessarily that things are quite absurd. And I don't think just because it's very useful to look at things through an evolutionary perspective means that you always have to, and that any other idea is a rebellion of it. By this, I mean, if I were to go out and travel to the moon because I want to, that is just as good of mode of approaching reality as any other mode. Just because it's sort of ridiculous, because as you go up there, your bones shrink and you grow quite tubby and all that sort of thing. All the effects of being in a zero gravity or a low gravity environment.
Well, I
Uh,
think that's the preferable mode of thought. You know, I wouldn't for one moment look to another fellow being of mine and tell them that I think it's preferable that they revert back to, you know, their primitive state of only seeking out base pleasure and desire, and not seeking any sort of extra curricular meaning or purpose in their life. Just to be, you know, as a clarification.
I see where you're. Yes, but however, like what I'm saying is, don't go towards base pleasure. I mean more so like don't think that you are at the fulcrum point ever. Like don't think that because you're looking at it from a scientific point of view or an evolutionary point of view here means that you're at the fulcrum point from which all things can be corralled. You know, I'm not saying to go towards base pleasures any more than I'm saying to go towards academia or
Mm-hmm.
knowledge or literature. I mean to say more so that you quite literally are in nothingness, Bray. You're in a ethereal pit, or not even a pit, but a base nothingness, and then the decisions that are made and the meaning that is derived are things that have welled up from within you, and you encounter these abstractions. In order to see them, you have to balance them against other abstractions in order to even to see them. I don't know white without black. So you create these abstractions, you create fulcrum points to compare with one another so you know that where you are and you know what you want. But don't think for a second that just because you have this abstraction of evolutionary perspective against this strange want to like go out and go to the moon, don't think that the evolutionary perspective is the quote fulcrum point. There's no base nature from which to encounter reality. There's no base way of abstracting your own
Well, I
consciousness.
mean, is there not? Can we not say that there is for any being? I mean, it would be different if we had sort of like a blank slate that had no sort of predisposition whatsoever, like almost like a god instantiation. Like, and even that may be absurd to conceptualize because we're talking about instantiating something with no attributes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, And so we find ourselves as these fleshy beings with natural desires, needs, maybe a more accurate word, because if the needs aren't met, then you revert to, you know, I was going to say matter, but that would be also a little bit absurd to say. But you know what I'm talking about. We revert to a non living state, and consciousness ceases, that we're aware of. And so I think what we describe as human, like a living human being, does have a sort of perspective on life that isn't that is rather driven a lot by our evolutionary history. Um,
Sure.
See
So
what I'm
you're.
saying?
I see where you're going, but however, what you're saying is it's so useful. Like this evolutionary perspective, it's a fulcrum that lets you lift and pick up so much stuff. It lets you assert and move around the world in a very profound and powerful way. So much more than what somebody of the 8th century would be able to do. Like it's very, very powerful. But
Well,
that,
I think that's what I think that's what I share with
yes,
somebody from an early century. I don't even want to go down that path too far because I don't want to insinuate that early humans didn't also seek meaning in some method. I don't know where exactly in evolutionary history we can say that that became a pillar of, you know, the Homo sapiens being or however you might have said it earlier, like mode of consciousness or something.
Sure, just perspective, if you like. I'm
Yeah,
saying there isn't one true perspective. That's the essential axiom I'm trying to get across. There
sure,
is
sure.
no central perspective from which everything else moves out and returns to. I don't, and there's no ought here. So what do I mean by that? I don't think, even though the evolutionary perspective is incredibly
Yeah.
useful, this perspective and all that. There's no ought. There's no God telling or ordaining. There's no ordainer here. You are you, and these decisions that you're making in this reality. You constantly return to this evolutionary perspective because it suits you. It does. It suits what you want. But that just goes right back to deriving your own want and meaning. But what do I mean by you? So much more than just Bray. No. I mean quite literally, in the same sense that mathematics are only as complex as you yourself are complex in relationship to those mathematics. Otherwise it's just lines on a table or lines on a whiteboard. So is civilization and everyone else's dreams and desires existent within you. So when I, Braves, talk to you about this, and I say, like, this is only meaningful insofar as you make it meaningful, I'm also speaking of all of your civilization and all of the people that you know, because all of these are just reverberations of what I mean by you. These are all ideas in your brain. These are all ideas in your head or in yourself. These are all reverberations of one essential being that I'm speaking to right now. So when I say these are just things that are useful to you, I'm speaking so much more of just Bray. I'm speaking of many things. I'm speaking of the entire system at large that exists within you, all of these things. And you return to one of the subsystems which make up your system, one of the perspectives from which you encounter reality is from an evolutionary perspective. And it's a powerful fulcrum. And you can organize a lot of smaller subsystems beneath it, as sort of a superordinate position so you can best encounter reality and get what you want. But don't think for a second that it is the central fulcrum. It is the central perspective from which all things to return. It's just something that you do. It's something that you do. In the same sense that a Christian can become very powerful, or forget Christian, a Muslim can become very powerful by having a theological structure, a perspective that everything fits inside of. The amount of strength that comes from that is ridiculous, powerful, profound. The perspective, the superordinate position that everything
Right.
contained within the Quran contains reality, and everything else is just a subset of that thing. You can derive a lot of meaning out of that. And what I am saying is that they both return to nothingness. They both do. Yours as well as this.
Well, yeah, so this is where the sort of discord comes up is that you're abstracting sort of to everything, and I'm
Mhm.
saying in the lived human experience there will always be a return to you cannot construct a human being on paper without a line at the bottom on the foundation that says base needs and desires. Like, it's not a human being if it doesn't hunger, doesn't thirst, doesn't seek shelter, and doesn't seek to reproduce.
Mhm.
Those will exist for every human being on the planet so long as that they are alive. And that's the, I guess, so to speak, fulcrum that you're talking about. That's the rock that I'm sitting on and
So
looking at everything else from. But you are abstracting
mhm.
out from outside of the human experience to everything and saying that that's just this one point. Well, I'm saying as a human being, this is the only point that I can, in my lived experience, base everything else from, you know. And I'm kind of borrowing from your perspective when I talk about space exploration being sort of rebellion, because it seems from my evolutionary grounding, my evolutionary foundation, I was never meant to be in outer space. I was never meant to fly to another continent.
but
Um,
but you're speaking
So
of mints here, Michael. Please.
yeah, that's the word that I wanted to catch on
That's
because I
what I
hear it a
catched at the
lot.
beginning. Yeah,
Yeah, you
you're not
say
meant to do
mint.
anything. You're not
I,
meant to
I
do
I
any of these
understand
things.
Mint
that, but
mint
there's
implies like
meant does imply a
It's an
big
epistemic
purpose in
error.
a
evolution which doesn't
Yes.
exist.
votive force that
Yes.
is.
What I'm saying is that the product of what I am, like, I didn't evolve to a specific sense of,
Well, here's
like,
the
I don't.
phrase axiom for you. You can't derive an ought from an is. You just can't.
Right.
All right. So that's what this comes down to. Like I'm really sympathetic to your position, but at the same time, you really can't derive an ought from an is. You really can't. And
Well, that's what I'm talking about and this may be associated with where this was trying to go. Or anyway, what I mean is this is what I'm talking about. Like, despite that, I'm not evolutionarily developed for the things that I'm speaking of. Earlier, I mentioned, like, the moon has no natural resources or anything to fulfill any
I,
of those foundational
I disagree.
desires.
I
So
just
it's like, what is the motivation?
there's certainly
Not
desires there.
Man, I
Certainly,
want to stand on the rock and look at pretty stars. Okay,
that's another
but
thing.
why?
Yeah,
because it's pretty.
because Michael wants to.
Because there you
Aesthetic
go.
You don't have to
value.
look at it from you can look at it from an evolutionary perspective if you wanted to, but there's no ought here. There isn't. Quite literally, if he does it, he does it.
But
Or
it
not
does
even that.
something
Not even
other
that. No.
than, you know, it does something other than fulfill a
Sure.
base desire.
Sure.
And that's what I am interested
Well,
in.
what is and what is not a base desire?
Well, we can look, so you would have to make a comparison. So, for example,
You would. Yeah.
I don't know, can a plant enjoy you get what I'm trying to get at? Like,
I
I
think I
think we
understand. Yeah.
understand, that certain species have some other. God, I'm not a biologist.
Mm-hmm.
The hallmark of a human being is that it has this pattern seeking brain that has developed, or put it this way, cows don't have a religion, you know.
Right. If you say so.
But okay, see, I made a very intentional, like, long jump. Cows don't have a religion because they don't revere anything other. See, Stefan needed to be here for this because he would be on board with the, like. We had a discussion on the podcast once about, like, cats and dogs, like,
Mm.
fulfilling sort of, how did he put it? Meaningful behaviors. Like, my cat isn't walking around the house looking at my lights or the art on the wall and going, man, the cat's not going to go outside and sit on the rock and look at the stars and go, God, that's beautiful. The cat is looking for food, sniffing out other cats, going to the bathroom, and taking a nap.
I don't.
uh
Yeah.
I
my
don't know.
my point
I
is
don't
if you
know.
are drawing something drawing something else out of going to the moon or exploring the stars, none of those, anything other than a human would not be interested in those. But that
So
is something that we have. Yeah, go
okay.
ahead.
So to that, I would say this is going to be a strange analogy, but I think it'll make sense. There's this argument between Leibniz and Newton a long time ago. Not between Leibniz and Newton exactly, but between their um, uh, academic progeny, whatever you want to call it, like the people that came after them that
Sure.
followed their lines of thought. So Newton, one of the ways that he showed behavior is this idea that everything kind of moves exactly on a point in space, like the way that Newton essentially views things and his school of thought. Like there is space, and then X moves across space, and you can record it in X space. But Leibniz disagreed. The Leibniz school of thought instead thought of things as no, no, no. Something moves relative to something else. If you don't have
Mm-hmm.
so for example, the Earth moves like this in relationship to the sun, or not. That's a bad analogy because it makes you think of something else. Um, like two balls are moving in space, but I don't know this one's trajectory or movement unless it's in juxtaposition to this one.
Right.
Otherwise, there's nothing to record. It's in relative it's relative. It's basically what I'm speaking of is relativity. It's relative. So why do I bring this up? I mean to say that you in order to create this position, this whole point about hallmarks is in order to do it, you have to create a juxtaposition between you and other things, between what you consider to be humanity and these other things over here, and then you say, well, this is what humanity is fundamentally when you make that position between the ants, the bees, and then the humans. The ants, the bees, the cats, and the humans. And you go, well, this is what makes humans humans, and this is what we need to do. But whoever said that you had to make that particular comparison, that particular contrast, and then draw from it, this is the exact key role of humanity. Like, these are decisions that are made by the perceiver as they try to encounter reality. These are things you choose to do. I don't see any particular need to evaluate humanity according to their want to see beautiful things any more than I do a cat's desire to see a large fish or anything like that. That's only one thing. You are a myriad. You are many, many, many things, and we can't say this is what humanity is any more than I can say what a cat is fundamentally, because there's so much more than just the a comparison, the relative abstraction between two items. Now, I'm kind of in the Leibniz position here when I say that everything is relative. I mean to say that I can't fully contain and say the human hallmark. That's what I'm saying. Like, Bray, I can't say your hallmark because I can't. I can say your hallmark in like what your hallmark nature is in juxtaposition to something else's nature, but I can't just say what your nature is. So the idea of saying you have a hallmark is useless unless there's a comma compared to something else.
Well,
But in
okay.
reality, your hallmark is quite literally infinite. It's hallmarks plural in relationship to plural things.
So this is what, and maybe this will clarify a lot of the conversation. Is so, you're talking about it has to be relative to something else, and let's shift the focus here and instead take human beings as a whole. Like, in human beings, it's the whole set of human beings.
Certainly.
What are some things that are shared by every human being, or at least every human being who plans on living? They need to eat, they need to sleep, they need to XYZ.
Sure.
They
Sure.
need to do all of that. Every human being shares those.
Mm-hmm.
Every human being arguably shares a need for meaning and purpose in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I suppose you are a nihilist, or a nihilist in denial, or
Well, even
some form of
nihilists
thing
have a
is like
form of meaning. It's the rejection of meaning
you
as
are
habit.
sure
Mm-hmm.
you are either in denial or you are not alive because you have had such an existential crisis that have taken some grave measures. My point being is that there is we can take all of those shared traits amongst human beings and look at, so we travel the stars, what's next? It's like, well, what one of those goals is this fulfilling?
Mm-hmm.
To me, space travel, while there are or at least let's take it right now, like right now we aren't fulfilling any of those survival needs, and you could say meaning is a survival need in from my perspective, but space travel or space exploration isn't bringing us more food, it isn't bringing us more water, it isn't bringing us more people to reproduce with. Although I'm holding out, aliens, I'm holding out. um
I
For reproduction?
I'm just describing
Yeah, unless we have some sort of Star
I'm
Trek
holding out.
reality where there's like Vulcans that you can
We got some
actually.
Right.
xenophilia going
Yeah.
on here.
So Bray, this is a other completely different tangent, but I would say that I don't think that's quite correct either, because I do believe that there are items on the moon that would in fact be useful to a human being, in the sense that they generate an income, and an income quite literally means access to material, which includes food, which to some extent includes sex, like
But
that.
is that what
I feel
most
like that's
people
arguing
are
beyond.
thinking about when they think about space
Yeah,
travel? I mean, is that what we were thinking about
there's an asteroid somewhere
in
in
space?
space, completely full to the brim of platinum. You get a hold of that sucker.
Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
is the little 5-year-old who's thinking about space
So that's a
travel thinking
Why
about,
do you have to choose the 5-year-old? Why?
because they
because
are
it's
disillusioned
the
from
median case.
it's like this is, oh man, there would be such a good like tangential exploration of research to do on sort of the like the intertwining of how money has injected itself into the search for resources, and like just the fact that like that is part of it, like that, oh,
Like,
there's
why
something
is that the
valuable.
pertinent question?
It
Yeah.
is a pertinent question, I
Yeah, it's
think.
like there's
No, but
something
it's only a pertinent
valuable out there
question
that
because
can
of what
buy me
Bray's saying right now.
resources,
Yeah.
uh but not resources. I don't know. But
So
my little like very weak point to stand on there was, it's like
Hmm.
that to me is not what most people are, when I'm looking at the the NASA book from the library, or I'm looking at the cross sections of the space shuttle. I'm not
Right.
thinking about,
I
man, I
see where
can't
you're
wait
going.
till they go out there and mine the asteroids
Well,
so that
here's the thing.
Jeff Bezos can have $1
Let me
trillion
ask
more
the question
dollars.
differently.
Oh, sure.
So we reach the stars and we establish ourselves, and then what? So the question, the way I'm interpreting it here is, okay, your curiosity has been sated to the point that there are thousands of planets indexed and cataloged, and you're in the far-flung future, so you can just walk in simulations of these things. You can, in fact, travel to the actual thing and drop down and be in your little spacesuit and be on that planet. Then what? What do you do when material reality has, for all intents and purposes, been conquered, other than, heat death? What do you do? What do you do from a philosophical, like existential standpoint? How do you start to consider things? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean that's literally what I wrote down here. I'm like, survival meaning question mark. Like,
As a
if you
way
don't
to
have to worry about
So
your
if
own
you go up
survival
the
anymore.
hierarchy of needs, right?
Mhm.
Actualization's at the top, basically.
Right.
But what is actualization? Is that just becoming more you? Is it becoming more established in reality? Like what?
Well, okay, but now we have to talk about things like nothing states and nirvana and super consciousness and that sort of
That's
thing.
kind of what I'm getting at. Is like
Yeah, I
once you've
expected you
conquered
would.
material reality and you say, okay,
When you finished extending the body, you now must extend the mind. That sort of thing. That's a conversation in itself, and I'm afraid we do not have enough time in this episode to get into it. I'm afraid.
Maybe we need to do a part
that's
2 and
fine.
rope
Maybe we
Stefan
should.
into it.
And get Stefan into the next one. Yeah, I agree. So I might. We should probably end the episode here. I got to get in the episode a little tiny bit earlier than we usually do. So I want to say that it has been an absolute pleasure seeing you both, seeing Michael's lanterns, and where you got something like black on your thumb there. Well, what was that?
Oh, that's just.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I do have something black on my thumb. Maybe that's ink
It's
or
the
something.
marker.
I'll
You
have to
were running the
investigate what that
marker
is.
across your fingers
It's
earlier.
the
Yeah.
what's that thing from those? What's that? What game is that where they have like the black on the fingertips?
I
Is
don't
that
know.
Elden Ring or something? I
I
don't
don't know. It looks like frostbite. Anyway, y'all have a wonderful rest of your morning. Listeners, if you have any thoughts, what do you think happens at the end of space or the end of space travel? Please leave some comments down below. We'd love to hear about it. And then Michael's got his astrology shirt on, as always. Good to see. And just like that, y'all have a great rest of your day.
Peace.
Peace.